Because of its location and its beauty, the Pacific trade winds have brought the Hawaiian Islands incredible gifts and incredible suffering. Blessed with its natural gifts, temperate climate, fertile soil, oceans teeming with life, native Hawaiians lived in paradise, and the rest of the world wanted a piece of that paradise. Before Captain Cook discovered the islands in 1778, there were an estimated 1 million people living here. By the time Cook and his crew brought their diseases, and then came the onslaught of missionaries and businessmen who took control, by 1900, there were only 37,000 native peoples left. Those weren't the last, or most deadly, of the tragedies that have visited these islands. The latest one has created a human tsunami and brought Hawaii to its knees. As America came of age and prosperity gave us a powerful middle class, the idea of a Hawaiian honeymoon or vacation became part of the American dream. The beaches and big surf became an ideal, and a whole new Hawaiian culture was born. Tourism boomed. It's easy to see why over 7 million people come to the Hawaiian Islands each year. The island paradise started to get crowded, and more people started to pay attention to the strategic location of Hawaii. And there's something here you won't see until it's too late.
Decided to eat outside, and the thought was, that way we can keep an eye on the car. We left all our gear in the back of it, in the back seat. However, as soon as we sat down, I did notice that I could not see the car because of that white van blocking. However, we went, ordered dinner, talked, ate, had a good time, paid the bill. Got in the car, drove back to the place we were staying, which was less than probably 5 minutes, 3 minutes drive time. As soon as I opened the back seat, I realized all the gear was gone.
In the 13 days we were in Oahu filming, there were over 1,500 property crimes reported on the island. That's about 115 per day. Jacksonville, Florida, with about the same population, had 32 per day.
Yeah, so the one couple that rings a bell to me is a couple that actually, they came to the North Shore, were snorkeling at Shark's Cove. I think it might have been their last day. They might have checked out a Turtle Bay hotel or checked out of a hotel, and then they had a lot of time till their flight, so they came out to, which happens a lot in Hawaii, where you'll check out of your hotel room at 11 or 12 and your flight's not till 8 at night, so you're like, what to do? You have 6-8 hours, and that's the most vulnerable time for tourists, and the other vulnerable would be when they arrive and they're waiting to check in and their car's filled with all their valuables. Well, these guys had their laptop computers, their iPhones, their whole wedding, more so it was their honeymoon. They had all their honeymoon photos, all their memories, everything. Last day of their 2-week trip in Hawaii, and everything gone, whole car gone. So they actually came to my shop to borrow the phone to call the police, to call the rent-a-car company and the police and file the report, and that's about as sad as it gets for a couple to lose all those memories because of some probably ice heads, meth heads.
and the people that depend on tourism dollars, at $12.5 billion per year, really don't want to talk about this.
The car that we had rented, which was a Chrysler Charger, was the most broken into car in Hawaii.
Is it safe? Is the car safe?
Well, things happen all over the island. I mean, I can't say if it's safe or not. It just all depends on the people, you know? Those are stupid things.
Did you rent a car?
We did.
Did they warn you that things may be stolen out of your car and that you should get insurance?
Nope. We didn't.
Now, do you tell people this?
We do. It's part of the protection when you come out.
All right. Were you told this when you rented the car?
$1,500.
$1,500, okay. Okay, you weren't told this when you rented the car. Okay, all right. Got it.
When we were out snorkeling at Sharks Cove, we heard that a woman's car got stolen because the thief came and took her bag from the beach while she was out snorkeling, found the keys, and just went to the parking lot and clicked the keys around, found the car, and stole it right while we were out there snorkeling.
And where are the signs to warn unsuspecting tourists that things are not so safe in paradise? Think there might be a sign?
So yeah, I do really notice a reduction in the amount of robberies at Sharks Cove this summer from last summer. Not to say that the drug addicts are less. I think they've gotten the point that these signs and these people, and there's just more active people and more vigilant people, that they can't just get away with it as easy as they could the last few years. And that's kind of what needs to happen, is you need to have and back to the point is, in all the surf breaks, there's kind of like a neighborhood patrol. They have their signs up, and that deters it. When you go one step further, they should have cameras. There should be cameras. They can put cameras up at every traffic light in the world to get you to take your money from you, but they don't want to put cameras up to save our tourism and to save people from getting thousands of dollars and stuff robbed. I mean, what's going on here?
The media liaison for the Honolulu Police Department declined all efforts for an interview.
Word from the police, they went absolutely silent. Trying to get in touch with the police was virtually impossible afterwards if you're not physically here in Hawaii. They were basically a dead end.
Given the ineffectiveness of the signage and the police, and the complete lack of responsibility from rental car companies, not only do tourists from the mainland get targeted, but when you consider the number of Asian tourists, most notably from Japan, who normally don't report a crime due to language and cultural differences, these people don't stand a chance. Of the reported property crimes in 2010, the last date of official statistics, $81 million was stolen. That was just reported crimes. What's driving this crime cost more than tourist dollars. According to an FBI report, appropriately titled Poisoning in Paradise, Hawaii now has the dubious distinction of being the methamphetamine capital of the country. With a total population of just under 1.4 million people, it's estimated that 30,000 are addicted to meth, also known as ice. In fact, over 37% of those arrested in Hawaii test positive for ice. 30,000 meth addicts in Hawaii, all looking to feed their habit. The unsuspecting tourist is easy pickings.
Especially crystal methamphetamine is not that expensive. The high lasts several hours, and it wipes out whatever problem they have for several hours. Of course, it's going to cause them problems down the road. Some are going to become addicted, and if they do, they're going to end up not being able to, hold down jobs. They're going to be out there stealing to pay for the drugs. Hawaii has a low violent crime rate, but we have a relatively high property crime rate. we're virtually always in the top 10 nationally per capita. And I'm convinced it's the tie-in to mostly crystal methamphetamine and secondarily crack cocaine. People are breaking into tourist cars. They're burglarizing houses. They're stealing cars to sell it for the rims in order to get some money to buy crystal methamphetamine.
Perhaps due to being plunked in the middle of the Pacific without Big Brother standing over the shoulder, halfway between Asia and Mexico, a rural, more relaxed atmosphere, easy, accessible meth has become the scourge of the islands. We kept asking the question of why. Why is this drug so devastating to these islands? The poverty rate is 9.1%, better than most states. Unemployment is better than most states. The educational level is above average. So why this? Because the original Hawaiians were such a small group, everyone is related in one form or another. They are a trusting and generous people. When ICE showed up, all it took was one person to try it and get addicted. Brother saw brother, sister saw sister, children saw their parents, and if they did it, then it must be okay, right?
My sister kind of introduced me to it, and basically, right after I took that first hit, I was in love with the drug.
Do you want your kids using drugs? Okay, you understand you and their mom are the most important role model in the world. So if dad uses drugs in a way, maybe without meaning to, you are telling your kids it's okay for them to use. Because they're going to think if mom and dad do anything, it can't be all that bad. Because we love dad, we love mom. If dad's doing it, it can't be that bad. So maybe it's okay for me to try it. And you don't want your kids using ice, right?
Asian and Mexican cartels use the islands as their halfway point. Traditionally, Asian cartels distributed crystal methamphetamine, and lately, the Mexican cartels are becoming increasingly more involved. Law enforcement reports indicate that now most of the ice in Hawaii appears to be produced in Mexico and California. Mexican cartels transport ice to Honolulu, Maui, and other Hawaiian counties via California. Some Asian cartels, such as Filipino, Vietnamese, and Korean, transport ice to Hawaii via Canada and California to avoid strict customs and border patrol inspections at Honolulu International Airport. Hawaii law enforcement estimates that approximately 80 to 90% of ice seized in Hawaii is smuggled through the airport via mail parcels and couriers on commercial flights. It is believed that methamphetamine was first used by Japanese kamikaze pilots in World War II. Preparing for their last flight, these pilots used meth to give them the courage and the high needed to fly their planes directly into United States targets. Meth then registered in the 1960s with the biker gangs, who made the highly toxic drug in the deserts of California and transported it in their motorcycle crankcases, giving meth the new nickname crank.
how the destructive spiral works. Methamphetamine travels through the bloodstream to the nucleus accumbens, a central reward center for the brain. This is a release site for the neurotransmitter dopamine, the chemical key to human pleasure. Dopamine is a natural chemical that causes us to feel good. More dopamine means more pleasure. It's one of the ways the brain rewards behavior that helps us survive. Food and sex are two of the highest natural pleasures. In mice, they can trigger around 150 units of dopamine. But drugs trick the brain to go even further. Meth actually sneaks into the neurons and forces more dopamine out. One hit of meth may trigger more than 1,200 units of dopamine. That's a rush 3.5 times more intense than cocaine and about 6 times what the body can do on its own. And the meth high lasts much longer than other drugs, up to 12 hours. But the higher the climb, the harder the fall.
Basically, right after I took that first hit, I was in love with the drug.
The feeling was, it's like you have nothing inside, it's just like a joyful feeling. It's like, wow, so.
It's that initial, intense high that the user keeps going back to find, and in the process, loses who they are.
I got arrested last year, November 2nd, and I was facing a kidnapping, a robbery and a burglary charge, and the kidnapping alone held an open 20 sentence. And I realized that through my addiction, my life got so out of hand, even though I had times of clean time. Every time I went back to the addiction, it got worse. My addiction got worse. The criminal activity I was getting involved with got worse. All my convictions was like stealing cars or stealing from the store. This one was the big one. And with my record, the judge said, she ain't coming on. We gotta quit it. And I cried. And I said, wow, God, you're good. But Lonnie, you're not gonna get out of this whole thing because there is a part you have to take responsibility for, which is the robbery and the burglary. This is my 3rd time in CPS, so it gets harder. And I have a history of, arrests. Yeah. And it's more serious now. Got more, there's so much kids in the foster care system that I know we got to work out on ourselves, but there's a point when we're allowed to get our children back and stuff. There's not many places that take women and children, or families. The program I'm in, they take the whole family, and
2010, I lost my dad, and 10 days after I lost my sister. And at that point, I still was in my disease. So the drinking and the drugging just made it kind of go away, Today I take care of my mom. It's just me and my mom. And, I think that for me, life in general means more to me now. Being with my mom and my family, and it's a feeling that I cannot express it.
As far as the addiction, he got out of that. Now he's in the Hope program, which is a blessing. I owe a lot to Judge Alm for standing by this young man, putting his foot down. And John feels good about himself. I feel so good that he feels good about himself. But he's very strict with me because it's very hard for him to show emotion. In that he's like his dad. So he'll growl at me. And it's okay. Okay. I don't care. We have this saying, I don't care. Because I'm proud that he's doing well. He's very talented. I'm very proud of him with that. There isn't anything he can't do. Parents today, they just drop off their kids and go. No time for the kids. You know, and that's why our kids today are having a lot of problems, issues.
Getting off and staying off ice is incredibly difficult. Not only is the drug dangerously addictive, most people are addicted after just one use. The emotional and psychological addiction is even more powerful.
I've never heard of a drug like, ice that would make you rob, steal, just acts of violence just to get money to buy it, or just to get it and kill people. It's just so addicting that people are willing to do a lot of crazy stuff for it.
At $50 to $170 a day for this habit, on top of erratic and violent behavior, it's just a matter of time before the ice addict gets arrested. And when they do, something extraordinary happens.
The crime rate for the people in Hope has gone down, without question. And it's showing because I think and Hope is no substitute for prison for the professional criminal. The violent, the dangerous, the ones who won't stop stealing, they need to go to prison. But that's probably 25% of the people, 30% of people at sentencing. That means the vast majority are going to be put on community supervision. And what we were doing on probation as usual was not working. We were sending a lot of people to state prison for several years at $50,000 a year to come out in a couple of years and no doubt pick things up right where they were. Research shows that drug treatment on the outside is more effective than drug treatment on the inside. But from the first week, I could tell the probation system was broken. I would get motions to revoke probation by the probation officer. They would list violations, and I realized first, nothing had changed since I'd been a deputy prosecutor in the late 80s. And second, I realized that the probation officers didn't have any tool to do anything in a swift and certain fashion. So what they would do is let violations of probation accumulate until they had a good argument for revocation. Then spend a couple of hours writing up every single violation that had occurred, and then get the person arrested, bring them back to court, and recommend to me I give the person 5, 10, or once in a while 20 years in prison. So here at sentencing, judges have said you can't use drugs. You've got to see your probation officer. You have to pay restitution. And then in the real world, they would go out there and not do those things. And there was no concrete consequence for it. The probation officer would document all the violations and say this person is not amenable to probation. Let's send him to prison for 5, 10, or 20 years. And I thought to myself, this is a crazy way to try to change anybody's behavior.
You have ice addicts on the street again and again, robbing tourists to the tune of $81 million per year, all to feed their habit. This didn't make sense to Judge Alm.
Especially crystal methamphetamine is not that expensive. The high lasts several hours, and it wipes out whatever problem they have for several hours. Of course, it's going to cause them problems down the road. Some are going to become addicted, and if they do, they're going to end up not being able to, hold down jobs. They're going to be out there stealing to pay for the drugs. Hawaii has a low violent crime rate, but we have a relatively high property crime rate. We're virtually always in the top 10 nationally per capita. And I'm convinced it's the tie-in to mostly crystal methamphetamine and secondarily crack cocaine. People are breaking into tourist cars. They're burglarizing houses. They're stealing cars to sell it for the rims in order to get some money to buy crystal methamphetamine.
Judge Alm saw that the system was broken and became passionate about fixing it.
So, well, what would work to change behavior? And I thought, how was I raised? How was I trained to raise my son, who was, I think, 15 years old at the time, but I was thinking when he was smaller. You tell him what the family rules are, and then if there's misbehavior, you give him a consequence immediately. It has to be swift, certain, and consistent. It doesn't have to be severe, but it does have to be swift, certain, and consistent. But the way I view it is if you didn't get sent to prison and you're put on probation, that means you're really making a deal with a judge, who's now me, that you're going to follow the rules of probation. If you don't follow the rules, it's a waste of time for everybody, right? Probation's for people that want to work with the PO, that want to try to make this work. You know, if they have problems, they deal with it. I don't expect perfection. We're all human beings. We can all make mistakes. I make mistakes too. One of the key parts to this is if you make a mistake, what's going to be really important is how you handle it, right? Something like a third of the people I have this conversation with, I don't see again because they start following all of the rules of probation. And I would hope that would be the case with you folks. If you do violate, though, the way you handle that will have a huge impact on how much jail time you get. And, you know, I respect the fact that you're all adults. My guess is unless somebody put a gun to your head, nobody can make you do anything you don't want to do, right? You guys are grown men. You're going to decide what you're going to do. But if you do make a mistake, if you handle it responsibly, it's going to go a lot better. And since I can't control what you're going to do, I can control what I'm going to do. That typically means you're going to get some jail time for any probation violation. So let me give you an example. Let's say you had an appointment with your probation officer on a Monday afternoon. Monday morning, 6 a.m., your cousin calls you up or your best friend, and he says, I had a beef with my landlord. I got to move all my stuff out. So you forget about everything else, or you take a day off from work, or if you're not working, you just go to your friend's house. You box stuff up. You get it all out of there, right? 6 o'clock that night, you remember, I was supposed to go see my probation officer. The way you handle that will be important. I look at what your actions are, not so much the words, right? If you go see the probation officer on Tuesday morning, first thing they're going to drug test you. If you test positive, you're going to get taken into custody. If you test negative, one of two things will happen. If you have a paycheck job or you're in school that's been verified, we're going to try not to even have you arrested. Because we want you working, we want you going to school, but we don't want you using. So if you test clean, if one of those things is the case, we'll try to set the hearing for Thursday or Friday, and I'll probably give you a weekend in jail. Because you missed the appointment, so it's a violation, but you dealt with it responsibly, so we're going to make it really short. Some of you have been watching this morning, right, with what happened earlier with these guys. You can see I key off the way they handle it if they make a mistake. Now, some other people might come to court, might come to the probation office, test positive and think, oh, I just don't feel like going to jail today. So they tell the PO, I didn't use, it must be a false positive. And every once in a great while, there is a false positive, so it's possible. But what we will do then is we will send the sample to the lab. They'll do a gas chromatograph test. We will find out one way or the other whether there was drug use. But what I want to tell you is if the lab confirms that it's positive, you can count on me giving you 5 times as much jail time as if you admit it. And so if you came in and tested positive, admitted it, you'd get taken into custody, but we'd set the hearing like 2 or 3 days later, and I'll probably give you credit for time served because you came to the courthouse knowing you were going to get arrested, knowing you're going to test positive, get arrested. That tells me you're having trouble stopping, but you're still trying to make it work. You're not running away. You're not giving up on yourself or the system. So if you admit it, you can count on like 3 or 4 days. If you deny it and the lab confirms it, it's going to be 15 to 20 days. Worse yet, on that Monday night, you might think, oh, I don't want to go back to jail. I'm going to go out and party, have a good time, and wait for law enforcement to come and arrest me. And unless you guys are grown men, unless you're willing to move to the mainland and use a fake name and wash dishes for the rest of your life, you know you're going to get arrested, right? You're going to be looking over your shoulder, and either somebody with a warrant's going to come and get you, or you're going to get stopped for speeding or something, and a warrant's going to pop up. And it's probably going to be at the worst time for you. You just found a job, or your wife's going to give birth, or something like that. But if you get arrested by law enforcement, I'm going to give you at least 30 days in jail. So admit to it, it's a few days. Deny it, lab confirms, it's 15 to 20. Law enforcement picks you up, it's at least 30. And if that continues, I'll give you the open term. Not that you're a bad guy, but you're showing me by your actions that you just can't, follow the rules on probation, and we understand that. Get them arrested as soon as possible and give them a sanction as soon as possible. So the idea was somebody would show up to the probation office, get tested for drugs. And crystal methamphetamine, or ice, is our biggest illegal drug problem in Hawaii. They test positive for ice. I wanted them arrested on the spot, go to jail. We have a hearing 2 or 3 days later with a prosecutor and defense attorney present. And that's the way to tie in bad behavior with a consequence. You're going to be placed on the drug test hotline. That is going to be busy at first. We just want to make sure you're not using. So, Mr. Batangan, where about on the island do you live?
I live at Puao at Kalihit, 1525 Kolik Avenue.
Okay, on Gulick. So, you could walk if you had to. What do you do? Drive, take bus?
Take a bus.
Okay. If you're not in treatment now and you find yourself having a difficult time stopping, that should tell you, go to a treatment program. You live on the windward side, go to Hinamauka, right? I mean, it's just, don't wait to get arrested. You don't need me to be telling you to go to treatment. You guys know this. If you can't stop on your own, go to treatment.
What we do teach is motivation. We help people to say that I am motivated to be honest. I'm going to have a sense of looking within, and I'm not so afraid to see what I see there because I'm going to have a lot of support, and other people are going to help me walk through that. And that willingness to go through that and learn some coping skills of how to deal with emotions when they come up in a way differently than using drugs or acting out, but in a way of helping you. And when they see that it can help them, that motivation is what empowers them to go forward. And that's one of the biggest things treatment can do.
Well, we try to keep the hotline open for a number of hours. It's typically 7:45 in the morning to 2 p.m., so there are a lot of hours. So don't wait till 1:15 to hop on the bus, right? You're never going to make it by 2 o'clock. And if anybody drives or you're going to get a ride, it's never going to be an excuse to say, oh, the battery died or my ride didn't show up. You know, you folks are adults. I expect you to deal with your life to get here on time. We have great drug testers. If you have a paycheck job or job training or school, you can even work out a deal with your PO to come in at 6:30 in the morning. We have a security guard at the back door, so people in that situation can get a drug test at 6:30 in the morning. 10 minutes later, they're on their road. And when I'm getting coffee, I see a lot of guys with the lime green construction shirts. You know, they're out there doing that.
Has it been effective?
It's been totally effective. And it's so neat to have something that actually works. Because I was a prosecutor for 16 and a half years. I was a local prosecutor, then I was the United States Attorney. And as good work as prosecutors do, you're often there after the train wreck. You're trying to hold people accountable, but the crime has already been committed. You're helping victims get restitution, give them closure. But if anytime you can get involved in actually preventing crime, to me, there's nothing better than that. We got the State Attorney General's office involved from the beginning. And their research showed clearly positive drug tests plummeted. Missed appointments of the probation officer plummeted. Then a few years later, Dr. Angela Hawken from Pepperdine had heard about Hope Probation. And there's an old joke in court that an expert witness is a guy from out of town with a briefcase. So our Attorney General's office can keep statistics, but when Angela Hawken from Pepperdine in UCLA heard about it, she got a grant from the National Institute of Justice and the Smith-Richardson Foundation. She came to do gold standard, top quality research, the same kind of research that's done in medicine, done in science.
So then I received a call from a colleague at UCLA who said, I've heard of a program in Hawaii with a judge that's trying something new. And at that stage, I was quite disheartened. Some of the early data we heard out of Hawaii, to me, was too good to be true. So I assumed they just hadn't calculated the numbers correctly. I was a little pessimistic. But I took the trip out to Honolulu and met with Judge Alm and was astonished by what I observed in the courtroom. What was clear is that Judge Alm had invented a true behavior change model, and that's what we needed. Something innovative from the criminal justice system that would help people who otherwise had no real incentive to change their behavior, to change their lives in a more productive way. And Judge Alm seemed to have found a recipe for that sort of change.
They identified 500 offenders in main branch probation, all with drug problems. Average age mid-30s, 3/4 men, convicted of property crimes, drug crimes, violent crimes. Average of 16 to 17 prior arrests. She ran the names through a computer program, and the names meant nothing to her. 2/3 of those folks, of the 500, got put into Hope. The other third were left on probation as usual. 1 year later, she looked at and we did warning hearings to start them in Hope the following week. A year later, she looked at the results.
And it was very clear early on, even in the early days, as the data started coming in, that those subjects who were assigned to the Hope condition were outperforming those in probation as usual. That really the behavior change principles underlying Hope were translating into improved outcomes. There was dramatic reductions in drug use, criminal activity was suppressed, and all those positive outcomes tended to go hand in hand. We started to see people were getting jobs, the probation officers were finding that they were having a much easier time working with their probationers. So it seemed to be a win-win situation. We spoke with inmates even when they were incarcerated on a sanction under Judge Alm, who said to us, well, you know, I'm here because of something I did. The judge warned me and said that if I messed up, I'd spend some time in jail, not years, not 6 months, but a weekend. And here I am, I'm serving the weekend in jail because of what I did. And when we heard the language of what I did, that's when we realized that hope was something special.
And it seems like hope is a very simple idea, but it took a lot of coordination, a lot of, getting different agencies, often from different branches of government, working together.
Within the first 3 months, drug use was down in the order of 80%. What we did find was a group of really hardcore individuals who had a hardcore dependency. And that number turned out to be quite small, depending on the population, between 10 and 15% of people who were simply unable to desist from drug use, even when facing that credible threat of a sanction. So the model did something really interesting. Hope did something really interesting. It helped to triage, to separate out that group of individuals who were simply using drugs because they had bad habits, because they wanted to do it, and there were simply no consequences for continued use. We separated that group out from the group who really had a true addiction issue, a group that needed extensive services, wraparound services to help them quit the drug habit. And Hope is really the first model we know of that finds a way to do that, that very quickly separates your drug-using population into a group that just has a bad habit, that can stop if they're told to, and a group that can't because they really need help. And what that's done in Hawaii, I think, is allowed them to make much better use of the drug treatment resources that are available to them.
Some programs want to have the easiest people to work with so that the program looks good. That's not the case in Hawaii.
We're picking the toughest people for this program, the ones who have histories of non-compliance. So now judges at sentencing can recommend somebody go into Hope. Or the person gets put on probation as usual, starts to have problems, they get recommended to put in Hope. It's even in plea agreements between prosecutors and public defenders now that they go into Hope. And because I only see these folks in Hope when they violate, I now supervise more than 2,000 felony offenders. We have 8,000 felony offenders on Oahu. I supervise more than 1/4 of it in my courtroom alone. And that's why I think it's getting so much attention around the country. To have one judge be able to supervise 2,000 of the toughest felony probationers and getting great results for it is why I think so many people are interested in Hope and interested in learning how it works. Okay, the way Hope works is if you folks can stop on your own, I'm not going to order you to go to treatment because we just don't know enough about the human brain to know who can stop and who can't. I bet you all know somebody who quit smoking cigarettes, right? Did they go to treatment? Probably not. And cigarettes are as addictive as anything we see in court. On the other hand, there's no shame in going to treatment. You may have relatives who drink too much or use drugs, It's not an excuse, but it puts you at higher risk. If you have kids, they're going to be at higher risk too. But Mr. Ilegbudu, if you don't show up for a drug test, what am I going to assume? Right. And if you were a judge, same thing, right? So if you can, the good news about the hotline is if you can show up and test clean every time, usually after 2 months, the probation officer will give you a new color that will come up half as often. 2 more months, half as often again. You're down to once or twice a month, and eventually you'll be off the hotline. We just want to make sure you're not using. Okay, okay, all of you folks who are not in custody, go down and see your PO. No offense, I hope I don't see any of you again in court. I'm sure it's a mutual feeling, and good luck. Otherwise, you're going to be led from here in shackles, so best of luck to you. Thank you.
The FBI and Homeland Security have been diligent in their efforts to curb meth from entering Hawaii, and it appears to be at somewhat of a standstill, but not eradicated. Since the inception of the HOPE program in 2004, property crime has dropped by 48%, but it's not gone, and neither is ICE. The Hawaiians are in a very fragile situation, and it will take work and cooperation to eradicate this deadly plague. The majority of the work will be determined by individuals. individuals taking personal responsibility. Personal responsibility. Those two words are making a difference. When we look at Hawaii and what's been happening there, we can't help but wonder if this tiny jewel is just an example for all of us. All of us, everywhere. Florida, Michigan, Kansas, and Utah. Each and every one of us taking a personal responsibility for our own situation. Maybe we're not addicted to meth. Maybe our addiction is food, or alcohol, or shopping, or gambling. Whatever it is that's keeping us from being the happiest, the most fulfilled mother, father, wife, son, human being. Accountability and responsibility begins with each of us. If these people in Hawaii, who have hit hell itself, can pull themselves up, so can we all. And it's simple. There are consequences for our actions, good ones and not so good ones. How can we take on the big projects, like saving our oceans and restoring our lands, if we can't even stop ourselves from eating that brownie or having that cigarette? It has to start somewhere, and it has to start sometime. Why not here? And why not now? Do something simple, just one thing at a time. We can make a difference, each and every one of us.